Beyond diagnosis, an alternative view of extraordinary states of consciousness. Modern psychiatry views certain experiences through a very specific lens. This lens is closely tied to the materialistic worldview of Western science. What we label as symptoms of illness today was understood fundamentally differently in other times and cultures. When we expand our perspective and recognize the boundaries of our current paradigm, a fascinating spectrum of alternative interpretations opens up. These interpretations are not less valid. They simply emerge from a different understanding of reality. In shamanistic societies around the globe, people who hear voices or see beings invisible to others are traditionally viewed as chosen ones. The spirits call those who are meant to serve as intermediaries between worlds. What Western medicine diagnoses as auditory hallucination is, in this context, the beginning of a shamanic initiation. The voices are not signs of a malfunctioning brain. They are communication with helping spirits, ancestors, or entities from other dimensions of reality. The aspiring shaman learns to cultivate this connection. They learn to negotiate with the spirits and use their messages for the good of the community. The ability to walk between worlds makes them healers, seers, and spiritual guides. The experience of thoughts being inserted from outside, or of one's own thoughts radiating outward and being received by others, corresponds in esoteric traditions to telepathy and access to collective consciousness fields. Mystics have spoken for millennia of the permeability of the individual mind to universal truths. What is pathologized as thought insertion could be the ability to receive information from morphogenetic fields, to read from the Akashic records, or to resonate with the collective unconscious. Channeling mediums report exactly this experience. Thoughts and words flow through them, but originate from higher sources of wisdom. The boundary between the self and greater consciousness becomes permeable. Not because something is broken, but because an opening is occurring. Visions of beings, lights, geometric patterns, or other realities overlaying the material plane belong to the core of mystical and spiritual experiences across all cultures. Saints saw angels. Prophets received divine revelations in pictorial form. Buddhist practitioners encounter devas and dakinis in meditation. The third eye, spoken of in many spiritual traditions, refers precisely to this ability, the perception of what lies beyond the ordinary senses. Clairvoyants describe how they see auras, perceive energy fields, or behold the deceased. These abilities are not viewed as defects. They are seen as signs of expanded perception that transcends the limitations of material senses. The feeling that external events carry special meaning, that the universe speaks through signs and symbols, is categorized in psychiatry as delusions of reference. Yet Carl Jung coined the term synchronicity for exactly this phenomenon. Meaningful coincidences that are connected not causally, but through a principle of shared meaning. In spiritual traditions, the world is permeated with significance. Everything is interwoven. Nothing happens by chance. Shamans read signs in nature. Mystics see in every event the hand of the divine. People on the spiritual path experience how life itself becomes a teacher, offering its lessons through apparent coincidences. The ability to recognize these connections is not a dysfunction. It is an awakening to a deeper order of reality. The conviction of having a special mission, of being connected to higher powers, or even of being divine in nature, is quickly dismissed as grandiosity. Yet spiritual traditions teach exactly this, that the human being is divine at the core, that each person carries a unique soul purpose, that we are all part of universal consciousness. Lightworkers report the moment when they recognize their true identity as spiritual beings who came to Earth with a mission. In the mystical experience of unity, the separation between the small self and the universal self dissolves. The awakened one recognizes that I and the Father are one. This is not the grandiose delusion of a sick mind. It is the direct experience of one's own spiritual nature, breaking through in moments of deep insight. Depersonalization and derealization, the feeling of strangeness toward oneself and the world, are understood in transpersonal psychology as threshold experiences. The old self-image dissolves because it has become too narrow for the new level of consciousness. In Buddhist teachings, the recognition of emptiness and the illusion of ego is the goal of years of practice. What feels strange is the beginning disidentification from the persona, the social mask, in favor of a deeper self-understanding. Shamanic initiations often describe experiences of symbolic death in which the old self breaks apart. This dissolution experience is painful and disorienting, but it is necessary for transformation. The world appears unreal because the habitual perceptual filters become permeable. Reality levels become visible that were previously hidden. Body sensations like feeling energy currents, tingling along the spine, waves of heat, or the feeling that the body is changing or expanding are well known in yogic and Taoist traditions. The activation of Kundalini energy is accompanied by intense physical phenomena. Practitioners of Qigong feel the flow of Qi through the meridians. People learning energetic healing methods report novel body perceptions that have nothing to do with physical anatomy but with the energy body. What is termed a synesthetic hallucination could be the perception of the etheric body, the chakras, or subtle processes for which our medical vocabulary has no terms. Hearing thoughts in audible form, the feeling that inner dialogues are escaping outward, is classified as ego disturbance. Yet meditators report similar phenomena when identification with the stream of thought subsides and thoughts are perceived as passing objects. In certain states of consciousness, thoughts lose their belonging to the self and are experienced as independent phenomena in the space of awareness. This can be the beginning of disidentification from thinking, a step toward recognizing that we are not our thoughts. The boundary between inside and outside, between thinker and thought, is less fixed than our ordinary perception leads us to believe. The use of new words, unusual language patterns, or symbolic expression is judged as thought disorder. Yet mystics of all traditions report the inadequacy of ordinary language to describe extraordinary states of consciousness. They resort to metaphors, paradoxes, and new word creations to communicate the ineffable nonetheless. Glossolalia, speaking in tongues, is regarded in charismatic traditions as a sign of divine inspiration. Poets and artists create new linguistic forms to give expression to experiences beyond the everyday. What appears as disorganized thinking could be the attempt to communicate in a language for which there are no established codes yet, because the experience itself exceeds the familiar conceptual system. Social withdrawal and the need for solitude are integral components of spiritual development. Hermits retreat into the desert or into caves. Monks live in seclusion. Yogis meditate for years in isolation. The turn inward often requires turning away from the outer social world. This does not happen from dysfunction. It happens from the necessity to cultivate inner processes in silence. Highly sensitive people, empaths, and energetically open individuals often find the ordinary social world overstimulating. Their withdrawal is self-protection and self-care, not symptom. In transitional times of spiritual transformation, isolation is sometimes necessary to allow the integration of new levels of consciousness. The feeling of being controlled, influenced, or manipulated by others can be understood in an expanded framework as perception of energetic dynamics. Sensitive people sense when they are surrounded by negative energies, when they are exposed to psychic attacks, or when foreign entities exert influence. Many cultures have elaborate systems for protection against such influences, from smudging to amulets to banishing rituals. The experience is real, even if it cannot be mapped in the materialistic worldview. People with permeable energetic boundaries actually perceive foreign emotions, thoughts, and intentions. Under certain circumstances, they can be influenced by earthbound souls or negative entities. This requires spiritual protection and clearing, not medication. Altered perceptions of time and space, the feeling of being in other dimensions or experiencing different realities simultaneously are core components of shamanic journeys and mystical states. The shaman enters the other world, travels to the underworld or the upper world, while their body remains in this reality. Astral travelers report experiences outside their physical body, in which they visit other planes of being. Linear time dissolves in expanded states of consciousness. Past and future can be simultaneously present. These are not malfunctions of the brain. They are access to dimensions of reality that remain closed to ordinary waking consciousness. The intensification of religious or spiritual themes is often viewed as pathological. Yet it could equally well be an authentic spiritual awakening. Conversion experiences, enlightenment moments, and mystical breakthroughs often go hand in hand with intense religious experiences. People who have a direct experience of God, who encounter the numinous or recognize their unity with the divine, are living through something that mystics have reported for millennia. The intensity of these experiences bursts ordinary categories. They are overwhelming, transformative, and can overturn an entire worldview in moments. This is not pathology. This is breakthrough to a deeper truth. The difficulty in distinguishing between different thoughts, or the experience that everything is interwoven, corresponds to the mystical experience of unity. In higher states of consciousness, the boundaries dissolve that dualistic thinking creates. Everything is connected to everything. Separation is illusion. What appears as thought disorder could be a consciousness that has transcended the limits of linear, categorical thinking and experiences reality as a whole. Rational thinking is only one of many forms of knowing. There are truths that elude the analytical mind but become apparent in intuitive, holistic perception. Insomnia and altered sleep needs often accompany spiritual breakthroughs. When Kundalini awakens, when energetic blockages dissolve, or when consciousness expands, the physical rhythm changes as well. Nights become times of intense spiritual activity, astral travel, visions, or inner work. The body requires less sleep because it is nourished in other ways. This is an adaptation to new energy frequencies, not a disturbance of the circadian rhythm. In many indigenous cultures, the person who today would be diagnosed as schizophrenic is recognized as someone standing between worlds. These people have one foot in everyday reality and one in the spiritual world. Without cultural context, without framework, and without experience guides, this state can be overwhelming and fragmenting. But this does not mean that the experience itself is pathological. It means that our society has lost the structures and knowledge to accompany such people and cultivate their gifts. In cultures that understand these connections, They are initiated, trained, and integrated into a role in which their special abilities become blessings. The Western materialistic paradigm recognizes only physical reality as valid. What is not measurable, repeatable, and objectifiable does not exist in this worldview. Yet the overwhelming majority of human cultures throughout history operated with an expanded understanding of reality that included mental, soul, and spiritual levels. The reduction of the human being to a biochemical process is a very recent and culturally specific perspective. It has brought successes in treating certain ailments. But it is blind to dimensions of human experience that in other interpretive frameworks are not only recognized, but valued. What if some of the phenomena that are pathologized today are actually breakthroughs to expanded forms of consciousness that have no place in our society? What if psychiatry not only heals, but sometimes also suppresses spiritual developments because it does not recognize them? Transpersonal psychology has begun to ask these questions. It distinguishes between pre-rational states that require development and trans-rational states that transcend ordinary consciousness. Not everything that appears irrational is pathological. Some things are super-rational, trans-rational, in the sense of a higher order that exceeds logical thinking. The challenge lies in recognizing when a person is suffering from a destructive crisis that requires medical intervention, and when they are undergoing a spiritual transformation that needs accompaniment, but not suppression. Our society tends to pathologize prematurely what does not fit the norm. But norms are cultural constructs. What is considered mad in one culture may be regarded as sacred in another. Opening to alternative perspectives does not mean ignoring genuine suffering. It means acknowledging that there are experiential spectrums that our current medical model does not fully capture. It means being humble in the face of the complexity of human consciousness and remaining open to the possibility that reality is wider than our instruments can measure.